On September 21st, 2016, 74-year-old hiker Peter Jackson vanished under mysterious circumstances while on a filming trip to Yosemite National Park. A year later, on October 1st, 2017, a tourist exploring the area where Peter had disappeared stumbled upon what appeared to be his climbing cane and a shotgun. The firearm was still loaded, with 2 unfired rounds remaining in the chamber. This discovery prompted authorities to reopen the search for Peter. On October 23rd, search and rescue teams operating in the remote northwest region of Baffling Canyon, deep in untouched wilderness, discovered a fractured human skull. Forensic analysis confirmed it belonged to Peter Jackson, who had suffered a strong, concentrated blow to the head before his death. What made the case stranger was the fact that Peter's backpack and his remains had been found a year apart and 14 miles from each other, suggesting they had been deliberately moved to 2 separate locations. Even more unusual, Peter's death seemed to be connected to his quest to find a mysterious mountain creature. Peter Jackson was born in 1942 and had celebrated his 74th birthday just before his disappearance. In his youth, he worked for a construction company, and after retiring, he spent many years living in Mexico. His fascination with mountain monsters stemmed from a bizarre incident decades earlier. At the time, Peter had been struggling with personal and professional difficulties and decided to take a solo trip to Yosemite National Park. During that trip, he became lost. As darkness fell, he relied solely on his camera's light to navigate his way down the mountain. At one point, he heard heavy footsteps behind him. Panicked, Peter turned around and saw a massive human-like face staring at him. After a few tense seconds, the creature vanished into the night. This eerie footage, later kept on his computer, was shown by his son John, who believed his father had encountered the legendary Bigfoot. The incident left a lasting impression on Peter and fueled his determination to prove the creature's existence. In the years that followed, he ventured into Yosemite's wild backcountry many times but never obtained definitive evidence. Peter's obsession was met with skepticism and concern from his family. Over the years, he grew increasingly withdrawn and paranoid. His relatives suspected he might be suffering from mental illness and sometimes found him absorbed in religious texts. After retirement, Peter moved permanently to Mexico, seeking solitude and a quiet life. By September 2016, Peter planned to visit his son and sell his property in the area. He intended to return to Mexico by the end of October. On September 17, he drove his Subaru into Yosemite National Forest and sent his last known text message to his son, saying he would camp for a few nights at White Wolf Canyon Campground and return on the 21st. John had assumed this was going to be nothing more than an ordinary camping trip, the kind they'd both taken before without incident, so he didn't think twice when Peter suggested it. But when the agreed-upon date finally came, Peter was nowhere to be found. Hours passed and repeated calls to his phone went unanswered. At first, John thought maybe there had been a delay or some miscommunication, but as the day wore on, unease set in. Concerned for his friend's safety, he contacted the local police, who soon referred the matter to the Yosemite Park authorities. When park rangers made their way to White Wolf Camp, the spot Peter had mentioned, they immediately located his car parked neatly in its designated space. Nearby stood his familiar filming tent, set up exactly as it should be. Everything appeared in order. The campsite itself was fully equipped. The cooking area was tidy, and the bear-proof container was stocked with a generous supply of food. Inside Peter's locked car, searchers found both his iPhone and tablet placed on the passenger seat, as if he had simply stepped away for a short walk. The vehicle showed no signs of damage or tampering, and the overall scene gave the impression of someone who had planned to return soon. However, something felt off. Peter's backpack, along with other essential gear such as his water supply and camera equipment and navigation tools, was missing. This suggested he had left the site on foot, taking only what he thought he might need for a brief outing. Not far from his designated campsite, the rangers came across another tent. It was small, plain in color, and oddly isolated. Inside, the sleeping bag was neatly rolled and clearly unused, and there were no traces of food, clothing, or personal items. The surrounding ground was undisturbed. No footprints, no campfire remains, no scattered belongings. It was as if the tent had been pitched purely for show. never lived in at all. The sight only deepened the mystery surrounding Peter's disappearance. Police conducted a brief interview with John, Peter's son. John explained that on September 17th, he had received a text from his father stating he was heading to Yosemite Park to film. He knew nothing about the exact equipment Peter was carrying. Park officials also checked wilderness permit records under Peter's name, but found no evidence he had secured the required permission to be in the area. A friend of Peter's, Michael, later provided investigators with more insight. He told them that the last time they spoke, also on September 17th, Peter mentioned entering Yosemite through the east entrance and intentionally avoiding busy campsites. Peter had explained that he wanted to go somewhere completely off the grid, where there was no cell signal. Michael described Peter's navigation skills as poor, and combined with his advanced age, worried he could easily get lost in the wilderness alone. Michael suggested they go together, but Peter declined. On September 29, 2016, search and rescue teams exploring the remote eastern area near White Wolf Campground came across a blue backpack. Documents and items inside confirmed it belonged to Peter. Not far away, they found a water bottle that appeared to have been bitten, visible teeth marks still indented in the plastic. Other than that, no significant clues were recovered. A year later, on October 1st, 2017, a mountaineer traveling through the same general area discovered a pair of trekking poles and a shotgun roughly 600 meters from Peter's last known campsite. The shotgun was rusted and damaged, but still held 2 unfired rounds. Investigators noted it had been discharged previously, suggesting the final 2 bullets were never used, possibly because trouble struck too quickly. On October 23rd, a 50-person search and rescue team returned to the area for a renewed effort. While camping in dense forest northwest of White Wolf, they found a human skull. Subsequent searches uncovered more remains, including a mandible, several broken ribs, and scraps of clothing scattered within a 100-foot radius. Peter's clothes had been completely shredded. Forensic analysis revealed the body had sustained significant damage from environmental exposure and wildlife activity, though the exact cause of death could not be determined. Crucially, there was no evidence of murder. In such an isolated and rugged region, few, if any, humans could have inflicted the kind of damage found. Despite the years that had passed, debate over Peter's fate persisted. One theory suggested he had simply become lost or taken his own life. Peter's former colleague, Alan Walter, told investigators that in recent years Peter had shown signs of anxiety and depression, often talking to himself and displaying a dislike for people. John confirmed his father had previously taken sedatives, but strongly rejected the suicide theory. John emphasized that in Peter's final text message, he had clearly and unambiguously stated his intention to return on September 21st, the date they had both agreed upon weeks earlier. Peter wasn't the type to abandon his commitments, especially when it came to family. He adored his son, and if he had harbored any thoughts of ending his life, why would he have carried such carefully chosen, well-prepared survival gear? To John, that possibility made absolutely no sense. Everything about Peter's preparation suggested he intended to come back. Peter was not a novice camper. He was an experienced outdoorsman who had visited Yosemite National Park on numerous occasions. He knew the network of trails intimately, could identify the local wildlife, and understood the challenges of the terrain. For him, a few nights at a campsite was routine, an interlude before retracing his route and returning home as planned. By all reasonable expectations, Peter could have easily made it back to meet his son on September 21st, just as he had promised. And yet, the reality was far stranger. If he had simply become disoriented, how could his backpack have been found more than 20 kilometers from the spot where his remains were eventually discovered? The distance alone was difficult to reconcile with the theory of a straightforward hiking accident. One explanation proposed is that Peter may have been killed by a wild animal. The name White Wolf Campground might suggest the presence of wolves, but in reality there has been no credible evidence of wolf activity in that area for decades. The main large predators here are black bears, which are indeed frequent visitors. However, their behavior is generally opportunistic. They scavenge for food left by campers rather than stalking people. In fact, records show that there have been no fatal bear attacks in this region for many decades. This absence of predatory incidents made the wildlife theory, at least in John's view, far less convincing than it might initially sound. Furthermore, Peter was carrying a shotgun, and there were no signs of an animal breach at his campsite. His food supplies stored securely in a bear-proof container was untouched. Some speculate that a bear may have attacked Peter at Big Oak Flat and then dragged his blue backpack eastward toward the camp. However, this theory falters when considering that the backpack was found intact, an unlikely condition if a bear had carried it dozens of kilometers. The third and most unsettling theory is that Peter was killed by a mysterious unidentified creature, possibly a massive ape, while searching for the so-called mountain monster. Yosemite National Forest, located in central California, spans elevations from 2,127 to 13,118 feet. Around 3.8 million visitors come to the park annually, but the vast majority never venture more than a short distance from the main tourist areas. Few enter the remote heart of the park, not only because of the difficult high-altitude terrain, but also because overnight stays in the backcountry require official permits. The park is the largest in the Sierra Nevada range and boasts extraordinary biodiversity, with an estimated 1,800 species of plants and animals, some of which may still be undiscovered. Local legends about an unknown creature have circulated since at least 1958. Witnesses describe these beings as standing between 1.8 and 2.7 meters tall, weighing around 280 kilograms, often accompanied by eerie screams and the sight of massive tree branches shaking without explanation. Yosemite is also one of the national parks with the highest number of unexplained disappearances, some of which have been linked to these alleged creatures. John believes his father's repeated trips into the mountains were an attempt to resolve a decades-old question, whether the thing he saw during a past encounter was real. Since that incident, Peter's personality had shifted dramatically. Once cheerful, he became reserved, paranoid, and deeply fascinated by the supernatural. He often had nightmares, waking in terror from visions of a giant mountain creature devouring him. Even the sheriff grew quiet when John recalled seeing that same blurred face again. Peter's disappearance and death remain unsolved. If his fate is connected to the campsite's condition, it's as though he never actually spent the night there at all. Evidence suggests he may have left camp on the evening of September 17th, perhaps drawn into the mountains by something, or fleeing from a sudden danger. Adding to the mystery, Peter's backpack and remains were found far apart, leading to speculation that he was killed near White Wolf Campground, and that his body and gear were later transported to two entirely different locations, Tree Shop and Double Rock Peak. There are no known animals in North America capable of carrying both a human body and a backpack over such distances, especially into a mountain crevice at 3,000 meters elevation. It's difficult to imagine what truly happened to Peter that night. Yosemite in September is a popular time for family trips and group activities. At 74, Peter should have been enjoying a peaceful retirement. Instead, he made what may have been the most fateful decision of his life, selling his home and venturing alone into the hazardous wilderness. After decades, he returned to California, once again stepping into the forest that had changed his life. Perhaps he believed that only here, deep in this wild and dangerous land, could he finally find peace. Hello everyone. Today's story is truly extraordinary. As I organize the details and analyze everything, it helps me clear my mind. At the same time, I can't help but feel compassion for those involved. After completing each section, I like to pause and imagine myself in the victim's shoes, considering what I would do next if I were in their position. I've encountered many unusual stories about Bigfoot, but this one genuinely gave me chills. So on the morning of September 2nd, 2010, Jonathan Jett, age 34, along with his 25-year-old girlfriend Rachel Bagner, set out for a trip to the mountains near Pemberton in British Columbia, Canada. Their plan was a 3-day adventure through the wilderness, starting at Mount Mateel and covering about 26 kilometers to Valentine Lake. After their excursion, Rachel intended to volunteer at a children's welfare center, while Jonathan was expected to head back to the United States. However, after they entered Mount Mateel on September 4th, they vanished without a trace. Authorities later discovered their Toyota sedan, which contained Jonathan's phone and camera. Records showed they had stayed overnight at a hotel in Pemberton on September 3rd. Early on September 4th, around 7:45 in the morning, they left for their camping spot. Once there, Jonathan parked the car along a forest trail at the base of Mount Mateel, about 1.2 kilometers from a nearby service station. From that point, it would have taken approximately 5 hours of hiking to reach the mountain summit. Rachel's sister, Elizabeth, became concerned when she didn't hear from Rachel that evening, which was uncharacteristic. She tried calling her sister, but received no response. By September 6th, Elizabeth reported Rachel missing to the police, prompting an immediate search. The investigators quickly found Jonathan's car parked on a small trail at the mountain's foot. Inside the vehicle, they retrieved Jonathan's phone and camera, but no sign of the couple. The phone records revealed no calls after the morning of September 4th. Although there were some work-related messages, they did not assist in solving the case. Next, investigators examined the footage from the camera. It contained numerous nature photographs, but two images stood out. One depicted a damaged tree, raising more questions than answers and deepening the mystery. Another photo, taken from afar, showed a bear that seemed to be following them. Additionally, two video clips were discovered on the camera. The first was recorded on the night of September 3rd at the hotel in Pemberton. In this footage, a humanoid figure appears near the window, lingering for several minutes before attempting to open it. The creature's features are hard to identify, but it appears to have unusually large hands. The hotel owner later confirmed this and provided another video showing Jonathan calling the police. She stated that when authorities arrived, no suspicious individuals or wild animals could be found. Due to the remote location, only Jonathan and Rachel stayed at the inn that night. Interestingly, 12 years later, in 2022, the innkeeper also disappeared and remains missing. Regarding the second video, more details will be revealed later. On September 6th, the search efforts commenced, involving 3 helicopters conducting over 50 flights over Mount Martel and nearby valleys. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, along with volunteers, searched forests, valleys, and caves, but found no trace of Jonathan or Rachel. The official search concluded in October of that year. Later, a hat thought to belong to Rachel was found, but was eventually identified as belonging to another hiker. During the search, some suspicious humanoid footprints were discovered. RCMP officer Steve Clare speculated that the couple might have become lost and trapped somewhere on the mountain. The weather around Mount Martel in September is humid, with frequent thick fog that hampers rescue efforts. Volunteers often slipped while climbing. The couple was experienced in hiking. Jonathan went climbing weekly and held a certification, while Rachel had been hiking since childhood with her parents. The park manager noted that the mountain rarely sees visitors, especially at night when temperatures drop sharply and fog is common. The terrain is easy to get lost in, especially for inexperienced hikers. Despite a 10-day search involving over 2,000 hours, no evidence of Jonathan or Rachel was uncovered. Later, their families hired professional mountaineers to continue the search, suspecting they may have fallen off a cliff into a crevasse, but no results were found. Mount Martel, situated in Joffre Lakes Provincial Park, stands at 2,783 meters and features rolling alpine meadows and dense, largely undeveloped forests that can easily disorient hikers. Visitors usually climb during the day and descend before night to avoid cold and dangerous conditions. Climbing gear such as ropes, crampons, and ice axes are essential. According to their purchase records, Jonathan and Rachel planned to camp overnight. Jonathan bought a light green 2-person tent, while Rachel purchased 2 blue down sleeping bags, along with canned food, steak, a folding knife, and bear spray. Based on available information, several main theories about the case include: 1. Animal attack. Some suggest the couple was attacked by wildlife. However, this is unlikely since Mount Martel is home to black bears and cougars, but attacks are rare. In the past 5 years, only 3 animal attacks have been reported in British Columbia, and no one has been killed by a bear in the park's history. Black bears tend to be indifferent to humans, and even if an attack occurred, the couple had bear spray and a knife, making it improbable they were both killed by animals. Jonathan, who was tall and physically fit, was well versed in outdoor survival, likely knowing how to handle wildlife encounters. 2. Getting lost or falling. Another possibility is that they became lost or accidentally fell into a valley. While plausible, there's little evidence supporting this. Their camera and phone were found in their car, with the latest photos dated September 4th, indicating they had reached their destination, explored, and then returned to the vehicle before disappearing again. It was unusual for experienced hikers to leave behind such essential items like their camera and phone, suggesting they may have left suddenly under unexpected circumstances. Bigfoot encounter. The third theory suggests that the couple was attacked by Bigfoot. This idea arises from another video discovered on their camera. In it, the couple is seen venturing deep into the remote forest. As they scan their surroundings, Jonathan appears to realize they are being watched by an unknown creature. The sounds of branches cracking and an unfamiliar whistling follow their movements. When the camera shifts, Jonathan spots a large, dark figure staring directly at him. Although it remains still, its broad and formidable build is unmistakable. Bigfoot researcher Tom Powell once stated that Bigfoot will always notice you before you notice it. In regions where Bigfoot sightings are common, birds tend to be unusually active, as if they're warning each other of impending danger. If humans linger, Bigfoot might use intimidation tactics like whistling, breaking branches, or throwing rocks to scare them away. In extreme cases, it could attack if someone mistakenly intrudes on its territory, which is highly dangerous. Another clue comes from Kavit, a seasoned tracker on the search team. While guiding a rescue dog through the forest, the dog suddenly trembled and refused to move forward, indicating it sensed danger nearby. This detail adds to the theory. The footage from Jonathan's camera might not be directly linked, as the figure in the first video could have been a vagrant or thief, while the events in the second might be connected to their disappearance. Historically, if Bigfoot targets someone, it tends to shadow them down the mountain. Bigfoot is believed to live in groups, so Jonathan and Rachel might have been surrounded. If they panicked and got separated, the situation could have turned deadly. The last recorded stomp on Jonathan's camera was on September 4th. When police found their Toyota, his camera and phone were still inside. This suggests Jonathan returned to the vehicle at some point, but questions remain. Why did he leave the items in the car and then go back? Why didn't they just drive away immediately? One theory is that they became separated while fleeing downhill. Jonathan might have reached the car first, hurriedly unloaded some belongings, and then realized Rachel was missing. Panicked, he might have gone back to search for her and then disappeared into the mist. However, this remains speculation. The mystery surrounding Jonathan and Rachel's disappearance has yet to be solved. No clues, sightings, or remains have ever been found, as if they vanished into thin air. Their families, who knew Jonathan and Rachel were planning to marry soon after the trip, still hope for answers. Rachel, a medical student known for her kindness and compassion, volunteered in underprivileged communities in Colombia and enjoyed painting and playing piano. Jonathan was equally admirable, described by his family as honest and dependable. The trip was meant to be their pre-wedding honeymoon, but it turned into a tragic journey. 14 years later, their bodies might still be somewhere on the snowy peaks of Mount Mathia. Despite this, their families continued to post reward notices on social media, hoping for any useful leads. Many tell me to stop searching, but I cannot give up looking for my son, Jonathan's father said. I want him to come home, just like a soldier who died abroad. Parents always wish for their loved one's return, even if only their remains. On April 27, 2007, a search and rescue team located the remains of Corey Colley in Beltrami Forest after an extensive 6-month search. The discovery was deeply disturbing. Mr. Cayley's body appeared to have been bisected, with his upper torso missing and his lower extremities in an advanced state of decomposition. Scattered nearby were bleached bones, indicating prolonged exposure to the elements. Initial findings suggested a violent dismemberment prior to death. However, the case took on an even more perplexing nature due to the discovery of unsettling photographs on Mr. Cayley's camera. Let's go back to October 16, 2006. Corey, 38 years old, and his friend James Freed planned a hunting trip to Minnesota's Beltrami Forest. If you go 16 miles further north from the forest, you'd reach Lake of the Woods, America's 6th largest freshwater lake, right at the Canadian border. This area is a maze of lakes and peat bogs. The terrain is so rugged and swampy that even experienced hunters can get lost. Corey and James brought everything they needed for the trip, including James's yellow hunting dog. The forest had its share of white-tailed deer and moose, but most hunters came here for grouse. Beltrami is Minnesota's second largest forest, full of rivers and interwoven lakes. To keep people safe, park officials had put up warning signs, telling hunters to avoid nighttime activities. That afternoon, around 4 p.m., Corey and James set up camp and decided to split up to cover more ground. They agreed to meet back at the campsite at 6:30 p.m. James made it back on time, but Corey didn't. When Corey finally stumbled out of the woods an hour later, he was sweating and looked rattled. He told James he'd gotten lost and asked, "Did you smell that awful stench while you were out there?" James shrugged it off, saying it was probably a dead grouse or maybe even a moose. Neither of them had any luck hunting that day, and James suddenly remembered his car was low on gas. He told Corey to stay put while he drove to town to refuel. "Don't wander off," James said before leaving. As James got in his car, he noticed a grouse just a few dozen feet away. Corey was already chasing after it as James drove off. Upon returning to their campsite at 9 p.m., James discovered it deserted and shrouded in darkness. Despite calling out for his companion Corey, there was no response. After an agonizing wait until 11 p.m., James initiated a search, retracing their earlier route. His efforts, however, proved fruitless, leading him to fear the worst. Distressed and seeking assistance, James encountered two unfamiliar individuals in the dense woodland. Although he couldn't discern their facial features due to the darkness, a pungent odor emanated from them. Their lack of firearms struck James as unusual given the hunting environment. They advised him to contact law enforcement immediately. Subsequently, James cooperated with an interview conducted by the Beltrami County Sheriff's Department. He clarified that neither he nor Corey engaged in substance abuse, but acknowledged Corey's use of painkillers following a spinal injury sustained during a prior hunting expedition. Describing their friendship as recent but strong, formed through shared fishing trips, James emphasized Corey's cheerful and responsible nature. He recounted that Corey had been pursuing a grouse when last seen, and that his phone calls went directly to voicemail. On October 25th, Corey's family, along with hundreds of volunteers and several agencies, arrived at the site to help with the search. They set up a large staging area, and helicopters and ground teams scoured the forest. 2 miles north of Moose River, searchers found James's dog, Sammy. The dog had gone missing with Corey, and it seemed Corey had taken the dog when he left the camp. By the time Sammy was found, he was severely dehydrated and malnourished. Corey sent samples of the dog's stomach contents and feces to a lab, trying to determine if it had eaten human remains. The results came back negative. There were no traces of human tissue, only dirt and grass. During the search, crews found several of Corey's belongings: his hat, a pack of cigarettes, some bullets, a lighter, and a glove. They also came across strange footprints, some of which showed that Corey had been walking barefoot. There were signs of a campfire, but it wasn't clear if Corey had made it. The footprints and items suggested Corey had been heading southeast, following a flooded drainage ditch into the dense, swampy woods. Almost everything they found, his belongings, the footprints, formed a straight line along this path. The search continued until November, but worsening weather forced them to call it off. On April 27, 2007, after the snow had melted, Beltrami County resumed the search with the help of 5 K-9 units. The helicopter spotted Corey's remains in a cold, swampy forest. His body was found lying in a marsh, with his legs submerged in water. Disturbingly, his body appeared to have been severed in half. The upper half was completely missing, while his legs had turned to bare bones, some scattered nearby. What puzzled search teams was that they had already combed this area during the initial search, but the dense grass had likely concealed the body. Aside from Corey's decayed lower half, his camera, shoes, and hunting rifle were never found. The autopsy revealed that Corey's bones had been gnawed on by animals. But here's the strange part. What kind of creature could tear his body in two like that? Sure, the Beltrami forest has some wolves and black bears, but neither of them could inflict this level of damage. And Corey had his rifle and plenty of ammunition. As a hunter, he knew how to protect himself. His shoes, they think, were probably the last thing he took off well before everything happened. All the evidence points to Corey getting lost in the woods. James told Corey, "If you ever get lost, head west." And Corey had a compass. So why did he go the wrong way? I don't know why he made that choice, James said. At first, Corey dropped smaller items, almost like he was leaving a trail for someone to find him. For a while, he must have still been thinking clearly. That's what the police said. The search for Corey's body continued through the end of 2007. Then in 2009, a hunter found something 39 miles away from where Corey's body had initially been discovered. There was a shoe soaking in water, next to it a blue jacket, and a camera. After testing, authorities confirmed that these items all belonged to Corey Kelly, the man who disappeared in 2006. Here's where it gets even stranger. If Corey had walked to that location, he would have had to go non-stop for 14 hours without eating or resting. However, Corey's body was found in a swamp in the middle of Beltrami Forest, while the shoe and jacket were located way south in the Heron Lake wildlife area. So how did his belongings end up there? Perhaps the camera held the answer. When the photos were recovered, investigators found that some were taken on October 16th, 2006, the day Corey went missing, while others were from the 17th. This means Corey survived for at least 2 nights out there. The photos were unsettling. Some depicted scenery, trees, streams, and the forest, while others showed deep woods, places that looked like lairs or nests. One photo captured huge, human-like footprints, and another showed a massive underground cave. The remaining images are difficult to interpret. While photographic evidence did not clarify the circumstances surrounding Corey Kelly's disappearance, authorities have proposed a more straightforward explanation. They suggest that Mr. Kelly perished from hypothermia, and his remains were subsequently scavenged by animals. This determination classifies the case as an accidental death resulting from unforeseen events. Nevertheless, this conclusion is contested by some individuals. David Paulides, an investigator with the Missing 411 Project, which documents cases of unexplained disappearances, considers Corey Kelly's case a prime example of hunters vanishing under mysterious circumstances within national parks. Mr. Paulides posits that these individuals may be observed and targeted by an unidentified entity. In the instance of the Beltrami Forest, he suspects this entity to be a swamp ape, also known as the skunk ape, a creature akin to Bigfoot, but inhabiting lowland swamps and emitting a pungent odor. Despite investigative efforts, the precise details surrounding Corey Kelly's disappearance may forever remain unknown. The swamp ape is typically characterized by reddish-brown fur, though reports of black-haired sightings exist. Standing at approximately 7 feet tall, it is smaller than its northern counterpart, Bigfoot. Some researchers theorize that the swamp ape might reside in subterranean caverns, or even underwater, rendering it extremely elusive. Its most distinctive trait is an overpowering foul odor, attributed to a scent gland, making its presence readily detectable. Since the incident, Corey's rifle has never been found. To honor his memory, the 39-mile trail running from central Beltrami Forest to Heron Lake is now called the Corey Kelly Trail. As for James, he has been consumed by guilt ever since. After Corey's death, he gave up hunting for good. Sometimes I think, he said, life has this strange way of flipping the script. Hunters go out there thinking they're in control, that they're the ones with the power, but in an instant, the hunter can become the hunted. The search for Corey Kelly was massive, involving 62 organizations in 2 countries working together, with 6,500 hours spent and hundreds of volunteers involved. Yet, even after more than a decade, Corey's case remains unsolved. His half-missing body, the cryptic photos on his camera, the rifle that vanished without a trace, and those 2 towering figures reeking of that nauseating stench. Who or what were they? After Corey's camera and creepy photos were discovered, which were much talked about in the neighborhood, new strange events began to occur in the Beltrami area. A couple of years later, 2 teenagers decided to repeat his route for the sake of thrills and put everything on the internet. They set off for the forest light, promising their friends to return by evening, but they never returned home. The next day, the police found their car at the entrance to Beltrami, but never the guys themselves. On the muddy road leading deep into the forest, the prints of huge feet were noticeable. They resembled human feet in shape, but they were too wide and deep, as if they had been left by someone weighing several hundred kilograms. Local hunters began to notice the oddities even before this incident. Many swore that at night a strange noise was coming from the swamps. Heavy breathing and harsh screams, similar to a mixture of a roaring deer and a distorted human voice. Those who dared to stay in the forest until dark described the same thing, a suffocating smell, as if from rotting meat or old decomposed animal carcasses. Some said that the smell appeared suddenly and disappeared just as quickly, as if its bearer was moving nearby, remaining invisible in the dark. The county sheriff tried to reassure residents, blaming everything on the activity of bears that allegedly migrated through the forest. But residents increasingly noticed something else. The forest seemed to be emptying. Beltrami has always been rich in wildlife, but in recent years there have been fewer deer, smaller animals have disappeared, and predators have avoided the swamps. It was as if the wild fauna itself sensed that something alien had settled in these places. In 2011, a new episode occurred, which only increased the fears. 30 miles to the south, a local fisherman came out onto the river before dark. According to him, the morning was quiet and foggy, and he was about to pull out his nets when he noticed movement on the opposite shore. A figure stood between the trees, huge, taller than any human, with broad shoulders and a massive silhouette. At first he thought it was a man in hunting clothes, but immediately he felt a sharp, disgusting smell, as if from decomposing meat. The figure stepped closer to the water, and then the fisherman realized that this was not a man. The creature moved toward him, breaking branches and making hoarse, low breathing. The man was seized with panic. He dropped the gear and ran, not understanding the road. According to him, heavy footsteps chased him for several tens of meters, until he jumped out into the clearing. Only there the noise died down. He returned home in a state of shock and had to give up fishing. Later, he told the neighbors about the incident, but did not contact the police because he was afraid of ridicule. Nevertheless, the rumors spread quickly, and the locals took his story as another confirmation. Something lives in the forests of Beltrami, from which not only people, but also animals flee. Since then, the forest has been shrouded in notoriety. Tourists try to avoid it, and locals warn strangers, if you hear the smell of rot, turn back. It is whispered that Corey's death was just the beginning, and that the swamp forest in Beltrami no longer belongs to man. Something else rules here, and the one who has once inhaled its scent will never leave the forest alive. On October 19th, hunter Mark Strittmatter, 44, went hunting alone in Medicine Bow National Forest and mysteriously vanished. A year later, on October 23rd, 2020, a tourist exploring the area where Mark had disappeared stumbled upon his binoculars and loaded shotgun. Nearby, an unfired bullet was discovered in the Tang Pavilion. Another year passed before Hunter Chris and his nephew came to the Crow Mountains near the park's border for a hunting trip. There they accidentally discovered Mark's backpack. Following this lead, search and rescue teams found his folding knife about 300 feet from the scene, along with various items like hats and gear. A human mandible was also recovered. Forensic analysis confirmed the mandible belonged to Mark Strittmatter, the hunter who had disappeared 3 years earlier. Evidence showed he had suffered a severe blow before his death. Even more baffling, his remains appeared to have been transported dozens of kilometers away to Mount Luke. On the morning of October 19, 2019, at approximately 5:30 a.m., Mark was last seen driving a white pickup truck to Medicine Bow National Forest. Surveillance footage from a convenience store captured him at 5:46 a.m., wearing a light camouflage shirt, gray trousers, a large hat, and an orange wool cover. October is a popular time for hunting and for people to go missing. But Mark didn't plan to get lost. He had a specific goal: to hunt a Sasquatch. Medicine Bow National Forest spans over 2 million acres, covering regions of Wyoming and Colorado. The climate in the park is highly unpredictable, with significant temperature differences between morning and evening. The tallest mountains rise above 12,000 feet, approximately 3,600 meters above sea level. The Cat's Forest is not only rich in wildlife, but is also steeped in legend, particularly the enduring tales of the Sasquatch. Sightings of the mysterious creature have been reported continuously since the 1970s. Over the years, many park rangers have heard stories, and some even claim to have seen the creature themselves. Mark planned to hunt in an area known as Changi Campground, located deep within the heart of the park. He was well equipped, carrying a high-caliber rifle, a folding knife, binoculars, and a backpack filled with essential survival gear. It's clear that Mark had prepared thoroughly for this expedition. Mark lived with his girlfriend of 13 years, Carrie, who often accompanied him on hunting trips. Around 11 a.m. that day, Mark tried to call her, but she didn't pick up. He then sent her a text message claiming he had nearly killed a Bigfoot. Carrie, however, struggled to make sense of Mark's increasingly paranoid and eccentric behavior. She believed creatures like Bigfoot were nothing more than myths from folklore. That day, the weather forecast had warned of an approaching blizzard. Concerned for his safety, Carrie called Mark back and urged him not to continue hunting in such dangerous conditions. There was a moment of silence on the line. Then Mark abruptly hung up. Kelly tried calling Mark again, but was never able to reach him. On October 20th, Kelly returned home and realized that Mark had not come back as expected. Concerned, she went to the police station to check if there had been any reports of an accident involving Mark. Unfortunately, she was the first person to report Mark missing. Local police began investigating Mark Stripmater's disappearance at approximately 3:44 p.m. that day. Instead of going home right away, Kelly drove alone to Changi Campground, the area where Mark had planned to hunt. There, she found Mark's white pickup truck parked at the junction of forest highways 801 and 803. By the time Kelly discovered the vehicle, it was already covered in a thick layer of snow. Inside, she found Mark's cell phone, wallet, cigarettes, and other personal items. The keys were located in the vehicle's mailbox, a habit Mark was known for. The only items missing were his shotgun and backpack. Kelly attempted to start the vehicle and found it to be in good working condition, with no signs of damage or malfunction. The presence of the cell phone inside the truck suggested that Mark had briefly returned to the vehicle before heading back into the forest. Following Mark's disappearance, authorities quickly launched an investigation. However, the heavy snow blanketing the mountains made search and rescue efforts extremely difficult. Despite deploying multiple search teams, the initial efforts yielded no results. It wasn't until a year later that a significant clue finally emerged. On October 23rd, 2020, a mountain climber discovered a pair of binoculars and a shotgun in the area where Mark had gone missing, about 600 meters from his vehicle. The tourist who found them informed the police about the condition of the shotgun. When recovered, the shotgun was loaded and an unfired bullet was also found nearby. According to authorities, the weapon had been fired at least once, but the final bullet remained unused. Mark's girlfriend, Kelly, confirmed that the items were indeed the same ones Mark had taken with him on the day he disappeared. Based on this discovery, police concluded that Mark had likely died. A few days later, a team of 12 civilian volunteers organized a search in the area in hopes of finding more clues or possibly Mark's remains, but came up empty-handed. It wasn't until a year later that the case finally saw a significant development. On October 16, 2022, the local police received a call from a hunter who claimed to have discovered Mark Stripmater's remains in Rock Mountain, a location nearly 17 miles from where Mark's vehicle had originally been found. According to the report, a hunter named Chris and his nephew were hunting in the Rock Mountain area when the nephew spotted a backpack on the ground. Inside were clothing and boots. Upon examining the contents, Chris found Mark Stripmater's hunting license. Police later arrived and discovered additional belongings nearby, including a human mandible, several broken ribs, and other personal items such as receipts and a folding knife. These were found within a 300-foot radius of the site. Mark's clothes were also located, but had been completely torn apart. After forensic examination, it was confirmed that the bones belonged to Mark Schrick. His remains showed signs of significant trauma, but the exact cause of death could not be determined. There was no clear evidence of foul play, although investigators couldn't rule out the possibility that he had been attacked and killed by a wild animal. However, it remained unclear what kind of creature could have inflicted such extensive damage. The police later reached out to Mark's girlfriend, Kelly, hoping she might provide new and valuable information. Kelly told them that Mark had once sent her a text message claiming he had nearly captured a Bigfoot. However, since she didn't believe in such creatures, she hadn't taken the message seriously at the time. She also recalled asking Mark why he would go hunting in snowy conditions. Mark explained that Bigfoot was typically extremely cautious and avoided human contact during normal weather, but would let its guard down during snowfall, making it the best time to track it. When asked about Mark's motivation for hunting Bigfoot, Kelly revealed that Mark believed she had been stalked and harassed by the creature. He claimed that while hunting, a large, heavily built beast had followed him down the mountain, even throwing stones at him. Mark had managed to record part of the encounter on his phone. Despite being armed with a powerful weapon, Kelly said Mark had been overwhelmed by fear during the experience. At some point, he became convinced that he had been attacked, or nearly attacked, by a juvenile Bigfoot. For Mark, hunting the creature may have been both an act of revenge and a way to prove himself as a skilled hunter, according to Kelly. However, police were unable to draw any solid conclusions based on her statements. Ultimately, Mark's death was classified as an unexplained, possibly supernatural occurrence. Despite the passage of several years, controversy still surrounds the cause of his death. The most widely accepted theory is that Mark may have died from an overdose of illegal drugs. In an interview, Mark's father, Mike, expressed doubt that his son could have simply gotten lost. Mark had previously worked as a forest guide and was highly familiar with the terrain and wildlife in the park. However, Mike also acknowledged that his son had a history of drug use. At the time of the incident, Mark was under medical care and taking prescribed medication to support his recovery. Police records support this, showing that drugs used to suppress withdrawal symptoms were found in Mark's backpack. Additionally, 2 other hunters later shared a detail that added another layer to the mystery. On the day of the blizzard, 2 hunters, Jacob and Cameron, reported seeing Mark trekking up the mountain. Concerned about the hazardous conditions, they approached him and warned that hunting during a blizzard was extremely dangerous. An argument broke out between them. In the case report, Jacob noted that Mark was acting strangely, highly agitated and unusually excited, as if he had been provoked or disturbed. One theory suggests that Mark may have been abducted by a UFO. This idea draws parallels to a case from the 1970s, in which a man named Carl Higdon claimed he was abducted by aliens at a campsite in Shawnee and transported to a distant forest. Similarly, Mark's body was eventually discovered in Rock Mountain, about 27 kilometers, 17 miles, from where his truck was found. To hike that distance on foot, especially through snow-covered wilderness at an elevation of over 3,000 meters, about 10,000 feet, would take around 6 hours without rest or food, an unlikely feat under such extreme conditions. For this reason, the alien abduction theory has gained traction with some people. A third popular theory is that Mark fell victim to a legendary creature, possibly Bigfoot. The condition of his shotgun suggested he was either hunting something or defending himself at the time. However, the fact that one bullet remained unfired in the chamber raises the possibility that something happened before he could take another shot. Adding to the mystery, Mark's binoculars and shotgun were found far from the location of his backpack. This discrepancy has led some to speculate that he may have been attacked at Changi Campground, and his body later moved to Rock Mountain. No known North American animal has the strength or behavior to transport a human body several kilometers up a mountain to an elevation of 3,000 meters. During the extensive search operation, rescue teams came across something unusual: massive footprints leading deeper into the mountains. These prints were significantly larger than any known animal tracks in the region, sparking immediate curiosity and concern among the searchers. Despite thorough efforts to trace the origin of the footprints, no conclusive evidence linked them directly to Mark's disappearance. Nevertheless, their existence added another layer of mystery to the case and intensified speculation about what might have happened to him. Some believe these footprints could belong to an unknown creature, possibly the very Sasquatch Mark was reportedly hunting, while others considered less conventional explanations. In the aftermath of the case, famed investigator David Paulides, who specializes in mysterious disappearances in wilderness areas, became involved. Paulides, known for his Missing 411 series, which documents baffling and unsolved vanishings in national parks and forests, interviewed Mark's girlfriend, Kelly, as well as others connected to the case. Intrigued by the strange circumstances and unexplained elements surrounding Mark's disappearance, Paulides chose to include this case in his ongoing research. The inclusion helped bring wider attention to the mystery, sparking new interest and debate among enthusiasts of the unexplained. Even now, years after the incident, Mark's disappearance remains enveloped in uncertainty and unanswered questions. It is a haunting enigma, much like the bullet that was never fired from the shotgun found near his last known location. That bullet symbolizes the unresolved nature of the case. Mark never got the chance to pull the trigger or fully conclude his hunt. Meanwhile, Kelly continues to hold on to hope, waiting for some sign or answer that may never come. The hunt that began with high hopes and careful preparation ended abruptly, leaving behind a story of mystery and loss that still resonates deeply with those who knew him.